On May 29, 1914, the Norwegian ship, the SS Storstad, collided with transatlantic liner, the RMS Empress of Ireland. The Empress was equipped with watertight compartments, and unlike the Titanic, which had sunk 2 years earlier, it carried more than enough lifeboats to accommodate everyone on board. Despite these safety features, the ship sank in less than 15 minutes, killing over 1,000 people and resulting in one of the worst naval disasters of all time. The Empress of Ireland and her sister ship, the Empress of Britain, were commissioned by Canadian Pacific Steamships as part of a fleet of ocean liners proclaimed by the company to be the world's greatest transportation system. Construction on the twin ships began in Glasgow, Scotland in 1904, with each identical ship having a length of 570 feet, with 2 funnels, 2 masts, and a capacity of just over 1,500 passengers, and could achieve a top speed of 33 kilometers an hour. For safety, the design included 10 watertight bulkheads, which divided the hull into 11 compartments. In an emergency, these compartments could be sealed off by closing 24 watertight doors. The bulkheads extended 3 decks above the waterline, allowing the ship to remain afloat even if 2 adjacent compartments were breached. After the Titanic disaster occurred, the Empress of Ireland also had her lifeboats upgraded with a complement of 16 steel lifeboats, in addition to 26 wooden collapsible lifeboats, for a total capacity of 1,686 people, 280 more people than the ship was licensed to carry. The Empress of Ireland was launched on January 27, 1906, and assigned to a North Atlantic route running between Liverpool and Quebec City. Over the next 8 years, it made a total of 95 trips between Britain and Canada, with its final successful crossing completed when she arrived in Quebec City on May 22, 1914. By this time, she transported almost 120,000 passengers westbound to Canada and another 67,000 passengers eastbound to Britain. Despite this track record, disaster would strike just after departing for her 96th transatlantic run. Around 1 a.m. on the night of May 29th, the Empress of Ireland left Quebec City, once again heading for Liverpool. Nearing the mouth of the St. Lawrence River, the Empress sighted the masthead lights of the Norwegian ship, the SS Storstad, at a distance of several miles. Likewise, the Storstad also sighted the Empress. However, after the initial sightings, a thick fog rolled in, creating visibility issues and causing the ships to rely on the use of fog whistles to maintain contact. Suddenly at 1:55 a.m., less than 250 miles from Quebec City, the Storstad emerged from the mist, smashing into the starboard side of the Empress at a 45-degree angle. Captain Kendall of the Empress called for the Storstad to plow further into the breach so as to create a seal until their passengers could be evacuated. However, the maneuver turned out to be impossible, and the current ripped the 2 ships apart, leaving a gaping hole in the side of the Empress. Water flooded into the Empress so quickly that there was no time to shut the watertight bulkhead doors. Unlike the Titanic, the doors on the Empress needed to be shut manually. Passengers and crew on the lower decks of the Empress quickly drowned, and those on the upper decks made their way towards the lifeboats. But the ship sank quickly, and within minutes, the ship's list was so severe that the lifeboats on the port side of the ship could not be launched. In total, only 5 lifeboats were launched successfully on the starboard side, and a 6th capsized while it was being lowered to the water below. The situation was further complicated when the lights and power on the Empress failed just 5 or 6 minutes after the collision, throwing the ship into total darkness. 10 minutes after the impact, the ship lurched violently onto her starboard side, leaving as many as 700 passengers and crew trying to escape by scrambling out of the portholes. And at 14 minutes, the bow of the Empress rose briefly out of the water, and then the ship slid quickly beneath the waves, coming to rest 130 feet below the surface. The hundreds of people that had managed to escape were plunged into the freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean. One of those survivors was Captain Kendall, who'd been thrown from the bridge of the ship, Swimming to the surface, he was able to survive long enough to be picked up by a nearby lifeboat. Immediately, Captain Kendall took charge of the lifeboat and began rescue operations, making several trips to retrieve survivors from the water and shuttle them to the Storstad. The Storstad also began a rescue and collected 200 survivors as well as 133 bodies. Responding to a distress signal, the Eureka arrived on scene at 3:10 a.m., just an hour after the incident, and managed to rescue 150 survivors from the water. A second ship, the Lady Evelyn, arrived at 3:45 a.m. but found no one left alive in the water. After nearly 2 hours in the frigid cold, any potential survivors had either succumbed to hypothermia or had drowned. In total, 1,012 lives, including 134 children, were lost. Only 465 people had managed to survive. A commission of inquiry held in Quebec commenced on June 16, 1914 and lasted for 11 days. However, there was much confusion as to the cause of the collision, with both ship captains claiming that the other was at fault. The inquiry itself noted this discrepancy in stories, stating, "If the testimony of both captains were to be believed, the collision happened as both vessels were stationary with their engines stopped. Their stories are irreconcilable." Ultimately, the swift sinking and immense loss of life can be attributed to 3 factors: the location where the Storstad made contact with the Empress, the failure to close the Empress of Ireland's watertight doors, and the design of the Empress, which included longitudinal bulkheads that caused the ship to quickly list. Another contributing factor was that some of the upper portholes on the Empress were left open for ventilation, which was against regulations that required that portholes be closed and locked before leaving port. When the Empress of Ireland began to list, water poured through the open portholes, further increasing the rate of flooding. This disaster resulted in changes to the design of modern ships. Instead of having a bow that slanted forward at the bottom, as was common at the time, the slant was changed to come forward at the top. This would ensure that in the event of collision, the majority of damage would happen above the waterline. The sinking was also cited as evidence for the discontinuation of designs using longitudinal bulkheads, which can cause ships to quickly list if breached. Although the sinking of the Empress didn't receive the same recognition as the Titanic had just 2 years earlier, it was no less significant, and it remains to this day one of the worst naval disasters in Canadian history.